Welcome back to Roots and Relevance. We are on episode 4 in our series on Esther. And so last time we got to toward the end of chapter 2, we're going to hit the last part of chapter 2 and then all of chapter 3. And I'll just tell you up front, this is kind of the dark chapter, right? Like this, it's already been a little bit dark, but this continues to get dark.
This is the Empire Strikes Back of Esther.
Totally. This is where we start to see anti-Semitism, and this is why this book has been so important, I think, in the life of so many Jews that celebrate Purim and remember this story, because this story foreshadows so much of their history, right? And I was reading this past week. This surprised me a little bit. I knew it had gotten worse, but I didn't know it was this bad, that anti-Semitism is back on the rise. In September 2024, this is one of the articles I read, the FBI data showed that anti-Jewish hate crimes had increased by 63% just since 2023. And then, according to the State of Anti-Semitism in America report, published just a couple of months ago, percent of American Jews said they have been the personal target of anti-Semitism in person or virtually at least once over the past year. And 56% of American Jews said they altered their behavior out of fear of anti-Semitism in 2024. And that's from February. I feel like it's just gotten, especially since you have now the conflict with Iran and Israel, and we've seen some of the reverse as well. We see people that will take Muslims in general as a group and kind of do some really bad things in their minds with them as well. We see hatred towards them. And so all sorts of bad behavior that's going to crop up here at the end of chapter 2 and chapter 3. So let's take a look at that. Jonathan, if you don't mind, kick us off with where we ended last week through the end of chapter 2.
So when the virgins were gathered a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther still did not reveal her family background or her ethnicity, as Mordecai had directed. She obeyed Mordecai's orders, as she always had while he raised her. During those days, while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the entrance, became infuriated and planned to assassinate King Ahasuerus. When Mordecai learned of the plot, he reported it to Queen Esther, and she told the king on Mordecai's behalf. When the report was investigated and verified, both men were hanged on the gallows. This event was recorded in the historical record in the king's presence.
All right. So if we weren't in Game of Thrones territory earlier, we definitely are now. What do you make of this in the last chapter? We're kind of introduced to some new characters here in their first actions. What do you see?
Well, I think it doubles down on the concept that Mordecai is probably some type of official to the kingdom, because he's walking around the harem. Now he's at the king's gate. So he has full access to the palace. And so I think he's put himself in a position of potential power to be able to effectuate something.
So he is basically proving his loyalty, true, at this point, to the empire.
Well, correct. And I think it's important he's doing indirectly. And I don't know why he would be doing it indirectly.
But, well, what's just happened earlier in the story, right? His niece has become queen, and queen to Ahasuerus. Now, what happens to the queen if something happens to Ahasuerus, right?
Right.
Is he truly caring for the king and the kingdom, or is he, again, acting out of self-protectiveness for he and his niece?
That's a great point. That's a great point. I had not thought of that, but you're right. Like it's self-preservation, or at least Esther preservation at point.
Right.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, and to why he might not have gone before the king himself, he might not have been able to. He might not have had that level of authority in the kingdom, where Esther would sometimes be called upon by the king to come in and to see him. So she had the ability to talk, hey, this is going to go down. And so, and she mentions him, like my translation says she did it in Mordecai's name. So she was like, hey, my cousin Mordecai said that this stuff, my uncle Mordecai said that this stuff is about to go down. And the king is like, oh, okay, well, we fix this, investigate it, find it out. And he does, so.
And punishment is doled out, but no reward at this point.
Yeah, there is a reward. Verse 1 says what the reward is of chapter 3.
Oh, yeah. That's
the reversal. Yeah. The reversal of fortunes.
That's right. That's right.
We see a lot of feast and gallows being played upon here, right? You know, at the end of chapter 2, there's a feast. I mean, in chapter 1, there's the huge feast. In chapter 2, there's Esther's feast. And now we're seeing gallows mentioned. I mean, we're seeing these repetitive themes that are being played out through the book of Esther time and time again.
Some beautiful literary elements.
Yes, absolutely.
And it is kind of important to point out, I don't think we've mentioned this in a while, but just a reminder that the whole book is a chiasm, like picture like a U shape or an X, where it's all headed toward chapter 6, which is kind of the inflection point or the turning point. And if it's a U, we're like toward the bottom of the U right now. We're like right in the middle. It's like a free fall down at this point. But every event is going to be mirrored on the other side by something else. And so we get little hints, like you're saying, well, like, the fact that this repetition, even the last line, this event was recorded in the historical record in the king's presence, seems like a very random.
Why would you put that in there, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Why? Why? And so, yeah, that's going to come in important later. Okay, great. Let's move on then to chapter 3. And Riley, if you can pick up and do, what did we say, first
1 through
6?
6.
Yep.
For these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why are you transgressing the king's command?" Now it was when they had spoken daily to him, and he would not listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage to him, Haman was filled with rage. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus.
Okay.
Wow.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my first question would be, why do you think Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman?
Same reason that Vashti didn't come when the king commanded her, right?
Just didn't want to?
I think Vashti didn't come because of the cultural problem, because she knew what was going to happen. It was not going to be a good thing for her with a bunch of drunk men, and it kind of broke the commonality of what you should be doing. But I think Haman this is a Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego story, that there was this, I don't bow down to any other but Yahweh. Or it could be Mordecai just didn't like Haman at all, because maybe he's jealous of him.
Do we know that Mordecai, we're told in verse 1 that Haman's an Agagite, right? The assumption is that Mordecai knew that he was an Agagite?
Yeah. I think I don't know if that's implied, but that makes the most sense, because actually we don't have any indication that bowing to another person was a symbol of like something religious at this time.
Which, to add to that, I was reading in my study Bible, and according to Herodotus, bowing to superiors was like a normal part of like Persian court. That was just like the custom. That's what you did.
Just like it is in some parts of the world today.
And so it was basically a sign of Mordecai being like, I don't even respect you, Haman. Like, what are you even doing here?
A personal feud, but at this point, right? It was like, okay, you don't like me, I don't like you. And to go back to what we said earlier, if Mordecai is trying to get in a powerful position, at least at this point, he's looking at Haman going, how in the world do you have this?
Well, not only is it, it says in verse number 3, the servants are asking, why do you disobey the king's command? The king has commanded that everybody bow down to Haman. That's how important that Haman played within the royal court. That the king says, you're to bow down to this dude.
So he could, from an appearance standpoint, make it sound like it's not personal at all, of like, hey, yes, he's not bowing, I may not like it, but the bottom line is you're disobeying the king's order.
And you would think, to like suck up to the king, that you'd be following this decree, you'd be trying to get into Haman's pocket, but he's not doing that. It's obviously some personal vendetta against Haman.
And we see that this choice will have, this lays heavy on Haman, as we'll see later in the story, but Haman is just furious. All right. But it's not, he just doesn't want to find out who Mordecai is. He wants to find out who his people are, right? And I think the Rabbi David Foreman breaks out a good point when it talks about Haman didn't want to look like he was small and petty by just, here's this guy that's not bowing down to him, let's kill him. But no, he's going to be making, hey, let's just not get this guy. Let's go after his people.
Yeah.
Okay, so this
We
is a
actually
good
talked about
question.
this, Jonathan. Yeah, go ahead.
That's right. Yeah. So I asked Tim yesterday. We were testing some of the sound, and I asked
Pocket conversation.
we were practicing. But so I asked the question: is this Haman not wanting to look petty and kill Mordecai because he wouldn't bow down to him? A personal insult that would look very petty to him. So comically, kind of going back to this comedy, instead of me just killing Haman for violating a king's order. I'm sorry. Instead of killing Mordecai for violating a king's order, I'm just going to kill all the Jewish people, and he'll be one of them.
I mean,
You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm just saying that could be the comedy here. Is here we're not going to just kill one person, just like we're not going to banish Vashti. We're going to bring this edict upon all Persian women for her supposed disobedience. Now I don't want to just kill Mordecai, because he wouldn't bow down to me as a personal insult. I'm going to kill all his ethnic group.
do you think like there's a fear of like the appearance there of like, that's just so below me. It's just petty to like go after one person. In other words, is he killing the Jewish people to get to Mordecai? Or in Mordecai, does he see a chance to kill a people that he doesn't like? Or is it a little bit of both?
I mean, it just depends. I don't know what happens in the mind of an Agagite or former Amalekite, but is there hostilities that's built up over hundreds of, if not thousands of years because of what happened in 1 Samuel chapter 15 or what happened in Exodus chapter 17? Is there that kind of hostility between the Amalekites and the Jewish people on the Amalekite side?
Well, you would think so. Like, the Jews killed almost everyone. So I would think that you'd be a little ticked off about that.
Does he, evidently he would probably know. We're told that Mordecai's genealogy is known. We're making known Haman's genealogy. So there is definitely something larger being played out here in the story between these two individuals.
That's a theme, yeah. Go ahead, Jonathan.
And go to Tim made this point yesterday. If you look at verse 2, where is that? 3, actually.
6,
the members
8,
of the royal. No, it's 3. The members of the royal staff at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's command?" And when they warned him day after day, and still he would not listen to them. Tim, what's that obvious a link to?
Potiphar's wife, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Came to Joseph
point. I
day
hadn't thought
after
about
day,
that.
day
Yeah.
after day.
Wow. I hadn't even seen that before. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Good point.
another
Good
hyperlink.
pick. Yeah.
Yep. That's good. In verses 5 and 6, we see Haman becoming filled with rage. One fun thing I saw is that you don't get this in the English, but in Hebrew, it's a lot of alliteration right there. The word for rage, it's like Hameh, I think, but it sounds almost exactly like Haman. And so you get 3 words in a row that sound just like Haman. And it literally means that he was filled with heat, anger, which...
Like Jonah.
Yeah, just like Jonah.
Isn't that like Jonah?
Another
Exactly.
parable story. Look at that. 2 parables having the same link.
2 parables, man. We love.
gosh.
And then we did a series on parables.
Oh
of
my
parables.
gosh. We got to get off these parables. Let's get back to images and idols.
Anything else in those verses before we go to verse 7?
Well, I think Wally brought it out. This is just almost like it's a replay of what happened with Vashti and Ahasuerus, that he felt with rage when Vashti was disobedient. Now we've got Haman filled with rage because Mordecai wouldn't bow to him. So it's just another repetition of this same scene.
Yeah, that's good.
It's actually
Verses-
great to go on.
Just ask Jonathan, you know.
He'll tell you. Verses 7 through 11. In the first month, the month of Nisan, in King Ahasuerus' 12th year, the Pur, that is the lot, was cast before Haman for each day in each month, and it fell on the 12th month, the month Adar. Then Haman informed King Ahasuerus, "There is one ethnic group scattered throughout the peoples in every province of your kingdom, keeping themselves separate. Their laws are different from everyone else's, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If the king approves, let an order be drawn up authorizing their destruction, and I will pay 375 tons of silver to the officials for deposit in the royal treasury." King removed his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. Then the king told Haman, "The money and people are given to you to do with as you see fit." Okay, what do you got there?
I'm listening, Wally.
Haman waits months, a whole year goes by, and he's just stewing in this anger. He's just letting it fester and build up. And even after all that time, he's still like, well, I still want to kill these people. Let's go do it.
And what's he doing every day of those 12 months?
Just casting the lots.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this idea of Pur and the Purim. I mean, every day he's rolling these dice to be able to get what he wants.
And by the way, like if the listener is hearing dice and you're thinking like modern day dice, that's pretty much what it was. They were clay cubes with inscriptions on every side. So isn't it ironic, don't you think, that...
Oh, we're going all
Linda's that on a scroll that is meant to show the providence and the sovereignty of God, that you also have this theme of randomness and dice
and chance,
even to the point that the festival is called Dice. I just find that really another one of those reversal things that I think is really interesting.
Well, I think the other interesting thing is when Haman goes to King Ahasuerus, he says three things against the Jewish people.
Right.
One is, the first one is a true statement. The second one, it's kind of not true. And the third one is just not true at all. Where they were scattered, their laws are different, but it's not that they don't obey the king's laws. There's nothing to show that the Jewish people haven't obeyed the king's laws at all. And so we obviously see deception, very similar to Mordecai's deception of the ethnicity of Esther. We see Haman's deception in what he's giving as a factual allegation against the Jewish people to ultimately get an edict to annihilate them.
Well, and I want to go back to Haman's justification of, well, they follow different customs and laws. Well, that was normal. From my research, it was par for the course for like the Persian Empire. They're conquered territories, kind of like the Roman Empire. You can have your religion, you can have your customs, just pay taxes and obey the laws that come out of Susa. And for the most part, that's what happened for all the cultures. And it's interesting that Haman's using that as a justification to specifically destroy one people group.
Totally.
Yeah,
when you have 127 provinces?
Go ahead.
No, just when you have 127 provinces, you're going to have all sorts of different cultures and customs. And I think it's funny, if you look at it, he almost contradicts himself even in the statement, right? They're one ethnic group scattered throughout the people in every province. In other words, they're mixed in with all the people, but then it says keeping themselves separate. All right, which one is it, Haman?
Is that a hyperbole? Are they actually dispersed among all 127 provinces?
Probably not.
Are there really 127 provinces for them?
That's another question.
So is Haman using that as a rhetorical tool to be able to justify what he's going to be asking the king to do on his behalf?
Yeah, even that last line, it is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. Like, what is...
They're not worth your time to tolerate it.
Yeah,
they're trash.
Wave your hand, give me the auto pen, and I will handle this decree for you. Which, by the way, when I saw the signet ring, I'm like, oh, it's like the presidential auto pen. And whoever has the signet ring can make whatever decision they want.
What cost is this? I mean, there's a financial cost that's coming on Haman's part too, right?
Oh, the 375 tons of silver?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, I pay.
Where's he getting
How much is that, Jonathan?
375 tons. That's a whole annual budget for the Persian Empire.
So it's not a debt that he actually could pay. I read one commentator was saying that when you see this, you're meant to think that when the Jews are plundered, that he was going to take basically everything that they had and just hand it right back over to the treasury. But I don't know that even that would be 375 tons of silver.
That's a lot of silver.
It seems exaggerated.
It could be hyperbolic. It could be hyperbolic. Almost comical in a way.
I mean,
I'm not going to respond to that.
Because you can't.
It's not really worth it to me to respond to that. It doesn't profit me in any way to deal with that.
Is it beneath? Well, is it even beneath you?
Yes,
it's beneath him.
It's beneath me. I don't bow to him.
We understand where there's no rebuke to that one. So verse 10, though, I think is important. Not only does he give his signet ring over, which is very comical, but I think it's important that, again, Haman is now identified, to go to this point that we've made over and over, he's again identified as an Agagite, right before he's about to do an edict that he's going to kill his Saul descendants.
And even though it is going to be in the name of the king, who is actually making this decree again? Did the king make the first decree about the women in the kingdom? No.
No.
And here we have Haman coming to him and saying, hey, I'm going to give you this. Let me make the decision for you. Right?
Right.
Wouldn't your commentators sort of agree with that idea of Ahasuerus and him not having the guts to be able to make the call in his own name to do it himself?
Yeah, and I think, again, that goes to the comedy of this whole thing of, here you have the king of Persia who's going to try to defeat the Greeks, the Athenians, or whatever, but he can't even make his own decision about what he's going to do with his disobedient wife. Or now he's just going to give over his signet ring to destroy a whole ethnic group without dispersed throughout his kingdom. It's just, it's very, very comical to me. And I think that's what they're setting up, the narrator is, or the author.
No indication that he's even drunk right now. He's just, here you go. Here's the ring. Go for it. Do with it what you will. Esther, let's do verses. Wally, can you read verses 12 through 15?
I can try. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict according to all that Haman commanded was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. It was written, in the name of the king of Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by the couriers to all the king's provinces with instructions to destroy, to kill, to annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by the order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa the citadel. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion.
Can I read a verse real quick?
No, that is the only translation worth to be read.
No, this is a different verse. Completely destroy everything they have. Do not spare them. Kill men and women, infants and nursing babies, oxen and sheep, camels and donkeys. Do you know what that is?
No.
1 Samuel 15.
That's God telling Saul in 1 Samuel 15 what he's going to do to the Amalekites.
Yep.
Amalekites. So it's almost the same language. Okay, here you go, Mordecai. What your God told to do to my people, I'm now going to do to your people.
And
in the same verbiage.
But where in the decree that God gives to the Jewish people, to the Amalekites, it says don't plunder anything, right? So he goes one more step, not only to kill everything, but then you're to take what is theirs for yourself.
Which is what Saul does, by the way. Saul does it. He plunders the best and keeps it for himself, just like Haman's going to do.
Yeah,
exactly. 3 words in a row that I found this interesting. 3 verbs: annihilate, kill, destroy. And they're all put together right in a row. And I believe it was Levinson that said that is a legal formula for total obliteration. In other words, like there's no room for mercy here. There's not an exception. It's redundant on purpose. In other words, it's kind of that same word over and over again. Obliterate, obliterate, obliterate. I want you to take them out. I found that this is genocide is what this is.
And why is he wanting for Haman? Is it about Mordecai or is it about the Jews?
I mean, that's
the question, right?
That's the question.
It's the question, right? Is this about getting Mordecai, and how can I hurt Mordecai more? I'll go after all his people, or not just his family, right? But all the people. And now we see that Mordecai is now saying, hey, these people that are scattered among all your provinces, they have their own customs. They don't assimilate well. Well, we look through the history of the Jewish exile, and they assimilated well, right? Because that was a command of God by the letter that Jeremiah asked the Baruch to write down to send to the exiles. It says, hey, listen, you're to pray for the peace of the city. You're to build houses there. You're to do business there. You're to have children there. You're to assimilate well within that culture.
Totally. And I think to bring up a point of relevance today, don't we see the same thing today? When we want to take out another group, we will make them like our other, and we'll say things like, well, they're not like us. They don't assimilate. They don't even speak English. I think what it does as a dehumanization effect is to say that they are not like us, and so they're below us. And I think it's a scary thing here as we see it results in at least the attempt of a genocide. And I think we see it all over the world today, even in our country, it's like a dangerous idea that if a person is not totally assimilated, doesn't look like us, doesn't sound like us, doesn't talk like us, they're not us, and they don't really belong here.
You look at past immigration streams that we've seen in American history. You had the Irish and all these different ethnic groups and Chinese. And what do? They come in and they are part of the culture, but also they want to remember and be a part of their own culture. So they form Chinatown, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Koreatown.
I went to one time, I think it was by accident, to the Italian-American parade in New York City.
Yeah.
And, they're waving all their Italian flags and taking pride in their, Italian heritage.
And I mean, and for those that want to, I mean, that's an easy way to be able to say, hey, there's justification to get rid of these people because, see, they're not abandoning their ethnicity. They're keeping it for themselves. So let's just do away with them.
Right. Yeah. It's good.
If they're go ahead, Jonathan.
No, I was just saying, I think there's another good point here with this other theme that we've got about God's sovereignty, and he's got this under control. Look at the day that this edict has been ordered, which is exactly the day before Passover, which Passover to them
Wait,
would have been...
the proclamation or the day of the killing?
Well, the proclamation, isn't it the first month of the 13th day of Nisan?
Yes.
Isn't that Passover?
Yes.
So the day the proclamation was done, is that right? The day the proclamation was done?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, is the day of before Passover, which Passover, if it reflects anything to a Jewish person, is God is going to save us. There is not going to be annihilation. We walk out of Egypt, and they're going to destroy the Egyptians, and we're going to plunder them with the Red Sea overcoming them. And so this is like, the author's like, okay, let's just assume this didn't actually happen. Okay, I know it did, Wally, but let's assume this didn't actually happen. I mean, if it would be a great story that this great edict would happen on the eve of Passover that demonstrates God's sovereignty and faithfulness to his people, that not only will they not be killed by Egyptian Pharaoh, but they will be killed and they will be plundered.
Well, isn't the Passover in response to the Pharaoh's, I'm going to take care of this people, right? I mean, that you see this declaration of Passover in light of what Pharaoh's said he's going to do to the Jewish people in Egypt. So
I also find the date is interesting too, because the chance, like the randomness of it, it was almost a year later, right, from the proclamation to when it was going to happen.
11
and
months, actually.
And it would take they said about 3 months to get the word out to the entire empire at that time. And so there's plenty of time for everyone to get the word, but there's also plenty of time for other things to happen as we're going to see. So I just find that very interesting as well, the timing of it all. The other piece I want to bring up, verse 15, is just the callousness of like, okay, we just, with the stroke of an auto pen, wiped out an entire ethnic group. Let's drink up, let's.
And there again, we're going to see Haman, and I mean, we see it in chapter 1, the drinking of wine, that we see him drinking here, and then we'll see it later on, right? This idea of Haman and the king sitting down to drink, but not in a celebratory manner when all plays out.
I cannot, I'm going to have to check this, but I know we talked last week about, or a couple weeks ago, about the idea that if you were drunk and you made a decision when you're drunk, you had to kind of ratify it the next day when you're sober. I heard that the opposite was also true, that if you were sober, there was some weird law that said if you're sober, then you ratify it by getting drunk. And this reminded me of that. I'm like, oh, wait, is this one of those examples where they were sober when they made this horrible, pronouncement, and now let's drink up?
Did Adele say anything about that, John?
No, but Levinson brings up, I think, a really, really good point here. Again, trying to link this back to the Joseph story. Do you remember what the brothers did after they threw Joseph in the pit to die?
Sat down to eat.
They sat down and had a meal. And so you get this same imagery again. Here you have, here we have the annihilation of the Jews, and what do? They go have a feast like nothing's ever happened. So I think, again, we have this Joseph story. I think the question to say is, why is the ordinary part of Susa, not the palace portion of Susa, why are they thrown into confusion? Is it the edict that this whole ethnic group is going to be killed? Or is that, why don't we just go ahead and kill them now?
Are you talking about the confusion of the people when the command is
when it's
given
Yeah,
out?
well, yeah, Haman sat down, the king and Haman sat down to drink while the city of Susa was in confusion. Why were they in confusion?
Well, is there a lot? My assumption is there's a large Jewish population there in Susa, right? If Mordecai, and we see Mordecai and his family, my assumption is there's a large Jewish population that maybe has assimilated within the culture. Maybe they have struck up Persian friendships and things like that.
So push back on this because I totally may be reading our culture into this, and I'm open to that. But to me, this shows a disconnect in decisions made in the palace versus what's happening on the ground. So in other words, it's easy to make a decision going, okay, I want the Jews wiped out. But if you're in Susa, you're one of the first to hear this proclamation. It doesn't take 3 months. It takes, a day. And I'm wondering if I get this command that my neighbor, Micah, who has been my neighbor since I was a kid, does this mean I'm going to have to kill him? And the confusion that would cause, it reminds me of, I saw so many people that, rightfully so, I think everyone sees the immigration issue in our country as being really, really bad. And so so many people were on board with this idea of like, okay, we're gonna take out every undocumented person in the world. But I've watched on social media as people that have neighbors or people that do their lawn or friends, when it affects them, all of a sudden they're like, this is not what we signed up for. Like, it's personal now.
Do you think we're given the total decree as it was read to the people here in this text? Is this the totality of the decree? Because
Yes.
That would be confusing.
so then we're not given a reason why.
Right.
There's no, we need to kill, annihilate, and destroy all the Jews and all because we don't have the because and what the reason why.
Are you saying Xerxes and Haman needed a better PR manager? Like, hey, you gotta give some reasons here.
Well, I think they probably were. I mean, when you're the king, it's good to be the king, and
Good to be the king.
Whatever you say is supposed to go, right? Even
Right.
though it didn't work too well for Mordecai and Haman when the king makes this decree and says bow to him, and he does it day after day, and it's known. But the assumption is, I make a decree, it's going to be done by my people.
Period. Like, you're not gonna
I don't
ask any
have
questions.
I don't have to give reasons.
I don't
for
owe
it.
you. I
That's
don't
right.
owe you an
That's
explanation.
right. Is that maybe one of the reasons why this city's thrown in confusion? What's happened? What's happened?
What did they do?
All
What
of
did
a sudden, like what
Yeah,
has happened
yeah.
right now, yeah.
Exactly. Good. Anything else in that? I know we went through a lot very, very quickly. So just looking back at the whole chapter as a whole, like, what are you seeing that is being accomplished by this chapter? What is it? Just kind of the next step in the story, or do you see?
I think we see cosmic drama being played out. I mean, the cosmic drama of God's purposes and plans for His people that are unchanging from beginning of creation into now. That God is working His purposes and plans overtly or covertly. That God is always at work in situations and that we find ourselves in lives to bring about His perfect ways of doing things. And while it might seem totally confusing, chaotic, and ridiculous on our part, as Isaiah said, our ways are not His ways. His ways are higher than our ways. And I don't have a clue why God chose to do it this way, but somehow He gets greater glory for how things are transpiring in the way that they are than if they could have been done any other way. And that's one of the things that I just take as an article of my faith and trust in the character, nature, and purposes of God.
This may be too long an answer for this episode. I'm curious, like, why do you think that this story, because it's recorded, is the story that gives God the most glory? Is that because it happened, or is it like?
I don't know why, because not one time is God mentioned in this story. You would think, coming up in chapter 4, there would have been a perfect opportunity for Mordecai when he's talking to Esther to say, hey, if you don't do it, God's going to save us in some other fashion. But he doesn't. He
kind of says it, but he doesn't say
He
it.
doesn't say it. No, he says that salvation is going to come another way.
Right.
But he doesn't say, hey, whether you do it or not, God's going to bring salvation in some other fashion. That would have been a perfect opportunity for them to work in a divine interaction with his creation at that point. But he doesn't. I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't have a clue.
So at that point, is it more about Esther's, to go back to Jonathan's earlier point about obedience, rather than not just the ends, but it's about Esther being obedient in that moment or doing what she's supposed to in that moment? Yeah, it's a good question.
Okay, my last thought is, and it's not just about this chapter, I think through 1 and 2, I really think there's something about the women in this story. You got to think about the 3 major women in this story, and that's Vashti, who I believe did the right thing. You got Esther, who went about it the wrong way because of a man. And then you've got Zeresh in chapter 6, which we'll get to, when the story starts to unfold and tumbles away from Haman. She says, since Mordecai is Jewish and you have begun to fall before him, you won't overcome him because your downfall is certain. It's like even Zeresh, the Persian wife of Haman, the antagonist to the story, says God's going to be too big without even saying God's too big, because the Jewish people will overcome you. You can't overcome them. So I just think it's really, really cool here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Isn't it interesting that it was Christians that had to come along and say, actually, it's not overt enough, so we're going to add all this stuff and make an Esther 2.0. Like, it's like the Jews didn't have a problem with that device happening of like, okay, you have to look, where's God working? And Christians were like, no, let's spell this out a little bit more. And that's not to say, I'm not saying, that's not a comment on whether, Esther 2.0 should or should not be in our Bibles. I just find that very, very interesting. Anything else? All right.
That's it for me.
We did it, man. We got through all of chapter 3. It's a little bit of a miracle.
Amen.
It is.
All right. We will pick it back up with chapter 4 next time. And I hope this has been good. We will see you guys next week. Have a good one.